I want to start with something weird that happens with OCD. You can be completely fine, relaxed, even looking forward to your day, and then your brain drops a thought that feels like bait. Not a massive thought, not even a scary one, just enough uncertainty to make you pause and think. And it almost feels like your mind is waiting to see if you'll bite. Most thoughts pass on through and disappear altogether, but the moment you take one seriously, the moment you start analysing it, something changes. Your attention narrows, you really start getting tunnel vision. The doubt grows, and suddenly that one tiny thought becomes the only thing that you can think about. And that's what we're talking about today. One of the most misunderstood parts of OCD is that the thought itself isn't actually the issue. Intrusive thoughts are incredibly common. People without OCD have them all the time. The difference is what happens after the thought appears. OCD needs you to engage with it. It needs you to take it seriously, to examine it, to try to solve it. Without that reaction, the thought usually fades away, like thousands of others. Studies have shown that actually intrusive thoughts are incredibly normal. Everybody gets them. Sometimes they're mildly disturbing in some kind of violent way, sometimes a sexual way, sometimes a kind of harm way. There's all sorts of different intrusive thoughts that people experience. But people without OCD do not take those thoughts seriously. When they experience them, they very quickly just put them down again. They may think, well, that was a weird thought, or why did I experience that? But they won't start to engage in some kind of moralistic enterprise where you're trying to figure out, what did that mean? Does that mean I'm a bad person? Does that mean that something happened back in 1982? Does this mean that I should really sit down now and think about this problem again and again and again? Of course you shouldn't, but that's really what the OCD wants you to do. And there's a really important shift that we need to learn to make here. And that is, there's a big difference between noticing something and actually engaging with it. When certain thoughts come up, we're allowed to notice those things. We're allowed to say, well, that's an odd thought, or I don't like that kind of thought, or, that thought is really disturbing in some way. But we don't actually then need to take it to the next step of fully engaging with it, trying to disprove it, trying to have certainty about why you had it, trying to figure out what it means. And the more that you think when you're doing this, the more that you analyze and try to have certainty, sadly, the more stuck that you become. What's happening in this situation is there's, of course, uncertainty. There's some idea, that we don't like. There's some doubt. Why did I have that thought? And straight away, we want to figure it out because, rather than just tolerating uncertainty and realizing, uncertainty doesn't necessarily mean something bad, we are presuming that it does mean something bad. And until we have thought about it properly, we're not going to be able to put it down. We're not going to be able to move on with the rest of our day. So we do have to sit here and think about it. We do have to, get that certainty. Really, the reality is that the thought is neither good nor bad. It's a thought that we don't like, but there is no negative consequence to it. It doesn't mean anything inherently. We only give meaning to it when we start to overthink it and overanalyze it. Unfortunately, the more that you do that, the more real, the more threatening the thought seems. And before we know what's going on, it kind of feels that we need to have more and more certainty about it. Almost as if we don't get that certainty, we are going to be tainted by the brush of that thought. There's a moment people often miss when OCD is starting to hook them. At first, it's just a question, but the moment you start trying to answer that question, your mind begins to narrow around the problem, and suddenly your world shrinks. Suddenly you're replaying things, analysing different possibilities, trying to feel more certain. And the strange part is that while you're doing it, it feels like you're being responsible, like you're trying to figure something out. But in reality, you're stepping deeper into the OCD trap. There's a subtle but powerful shift that happens where we move from curiosity to rumination. We start off curious because we want to know, what does that thought mean? Is it something bad, or where did it come from? But very quickly, that kind of more innocent curiosity turns into this furious rumination where, we start believing that it must mean something bad. The negative interpretation takes over, and suddenly we're feeling horrible. We're feeling really anxious. There's a lot of shame maybe coming up, all sorts of difficult emotions. And we're telling ourselves, I have to think about this more. I have to get to the bottom of this. But of course, the more we think about it, the more stuck we get. And something else about this that's really important is that thinking feels productive. When you're getting stuck in the rumination trap, you feel that you're actually doing something about the problem. You're not allowing that uncertainty to just be. You're demonstrating to yourself that you're a responsible and conscientious person, and that you're going to think about that problem and prove to yourself that it's definitely not a thing, that it definitely never could happen or never has happened, and that you feel comfortable about that. But again, all we're actually doing is drawing more attention to that thing, creating more uncertainty and more doubt about it, and making ourselves feel, physically sick sometimes with the level of anxiety that we create. And if you're struggling with OCD, I do have a 12-week program to help you to break free. You can find out more in the show notes. Here's something fascinating about the brain. The more attention you give something, the more real and important it begins to feel. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. Repetition increases believability. So if you think about the same worry 10 times or 50 times or 100 times, your brain slowly starts treating it as significant, even if it began as nonsense. This is something that I really noticed in myself when I was really struggling with OCD back in my 20s and early 30s. It would feel so infuriating because I would start trying to fix it, of course. I didn't want to allow the OCD to just be. Some of the thoughts would really confuse me, leave me with a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I thought, I can't just let that be. I have to disprove that in some way. I need to have some certainty about that. And so, of course, I would think about it. I would try to bring my logic and reason into it. And I would reassure myself or ask other people to reassure me or do research or, go onto Google, whatever it was. But actually, all I was really doing was strengthening the obsession and making myself more aware of it. The more that I kind of returned to it, the more that my brain wanted to think about it. Ultimately, what I was doing was just giving more and more energy to the obsession. The more we think about something, the more we're feeding it. We're almost literally kind of throwing more wood onto the fire of OCD. In order to kind of change that, we have to learn how to let go, to stop thinking about it, to bring our attention under our control and focus our attention where we want it to be, not on trying to figure out the obsessions. One thing that many people realize after a while is that OCD is incredibly patient. It will throw hundreds of thoughts at you that go nowhere at all, but eventually one lands. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're stressed, maybe you pause for a second too long. And the moment that happens, OCD locks on, anxiety rises, urgency appears, and suddenly it feels like this thought must be solved right now. What's really happening in this situation is that your amygdala is firing. This is really your threat detection system. It's scanning the environment, looking for something that might be wrong, something that could be dangerous. And often if you have OCD, we can be very, very good at finding that dangerous thing, even when, it's not really there. Oftentimes it's just something in our mind, a story that we're telling ourselves, an intrusive thought that we had earlier that day. And, the amygdala has gone off, and that causes the sympathetic nervous system to come online. This is your fight or flight system. When this system is activated, the body is really primed. It starts to pump out stress hormones, and anything that you're struggling with, any fear that might be present, any obsession that you may struggle with, will suddenly seem, a lot more threatening. And it's almost like we get tunnel vision when this happens. we start to get so fixated on that thing. We tell ourselves, I have to figure this out. I have to have certainty about this thing. If I don't, something awful will happen. And so we start thinking about it more and more. And really, this is our biology kind of working against us. We're kind of thinking there's some kind of tiger that's about to jump out and attack us, when really, the tiger is really just a thought in our own minds. And if we can learn to not react all the time to those threats, when this system is activated, it's about learning how to spot that, to recognize that, and to not start ruminating in response to feeling threatened or feeling that something awful is about to happen. What has happened is, you've had a thought that you didn't like, or a certain situation came up that, reminded you of your obsession and your fear. That's caused you to be activated. It's caused your sympathetic nervous system to come online. And if you're able to just pause and, just wait and feel some of that anxiety, allow that to be a little bit, and choose to focus your attention onto a meaningful activity in that moment, rather than trying to get caught up in disproving that thing. Often that can create a little bit of space for you and can help you to kind of move on with your day in a different way. Really, the exit is the opposite of what OCD suggests. The natural instinct when something feels unresolved is to think about it more. And that's exactly what OCD relies on. But the real shift in recovery happens when people start doing the opposite. Instead of trying to solve the thought, they recognize the pattern. They notice the urge to analyze, to escape, to fight, and they allow the discomfort and the uncertainty to exist, and they continue with their life anyway. At first, that feels wrong, but over time, it retrains the brain in a powerful way. When my OCD was at its worst, there would be times where I felt the anxiety, the panic was so strong, that I didn't even want to leave my house at times, because it felt like it was constantly going to come up. Anything could trigger it. Somebody could look at me in a certain way. A thought could come up. A certain situation might happen. And then I would spiral. I would get stuck in my head with my thoughts. The difficult feelings would come up, and it was so difficult. But fortunately, around about that time, when I was really at the peak of my suffering with it, this is when I learned about the work of John Kabat-Zinn, a mindfulness teacher and somebody who's often known as the kind of godfather of mindfulness in the West. His kind of ideas were really revolutionary in the 80s and 90s, particularly in the West. And that really was learning how to allow that discomfort in the body to be. If you can practice curiosity of discomfort, of anxiety, actually allowing these things to be there in the body, not fighting with them so much, and realizing that actually you're strong enough to experience these things. You don't need to just fight with them. You don't need to just push them away. You can learn how to befriend them, whether that's through different types of meditation, where you learn to feel, the sensations of anxiety a bit more. Whether that's through kind of breathwork exercises that give you a bit more of a sense of safety in your in your body. Whether that's through doing more traditional exposure activities. All of these things are actually about trying to move towards the discomfort rather than constantly pushing them away. And this is really what helped me to change my life and to change my relationship with OCD. And if you're struggling, I do have a 12-week program to help you to break free from OCD. It's really based upon my own personal experiences of struggling with this for many years, and also the work that I've done with hundreds of people to help them to overcome it. If you're interested in finding out more about the program, you can head over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com, and you can book in there for a free discovery call. Many thanks, and I will see you next time. This video is for education only. It's not therapy or medical advice. If you're struggling, please speak with a licensed mental health professional.